During much of the 20th century, there were few hospitals outside of major cities, and cardiac arrest was considered a death sentence. Until the 1960s, when the face of emergency medicine was transformed by Dr. Frank Pantridge and his invention of the first portable defibrillator, breaking the barrier between emergency cardiac care and the hospital. On October 3, 1916, Frank James Pantridge was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland. This was only 2 decades after the discovery of the open heart massage, a treatment where the patient's chest was opened and the heart was rhythmically massaged by hand until a pulse returned.
Continued massage gives you time to change to a more adequate and aseptic technique.
Though this was groundbreaking, most patients lived an average of only 7 days if the treatment worked. This procedure was still very experimental as Pantridge grew up. Still, medical advancements like this and many others sparked his dream to become a doctor. His dream started becoming a reality in 1939 when he began medical school nearby at Queen's University in Belfast. Only 6 years before Pantridge entered medical school, treatment for cardiac arrest had progressed from open chest massage to the use of defibrillators and pacemakers, thanks to the contributions of Dr. Albert Hyman, a cardiologist, and his brother Charles, an electrician. Their idea to create a car starter for your heart led to the pacemaker, and eventually the first defibrillator in 1933. Pantridge's time in university was short-lived as the outbreak of World War II pulled him away from his country and into the war. He was posted to the Far East as an army doctor treating wounded soldiers. In 1942, Pantridge and 14,000 other men were captured in the fall of Singapore. Pantridge was taken to the war camp in Burma, where he and other prisoners of war worked all day building the Burma Railway. These men were malnourished and many died due to illness or starvation. After months of grueling work in blistering heat and frequent rainstorms, the railway was completed, and Pantridge, still a prisoner of war, was sent back to Singapore to help treat the locals. It was here in the small villages of Singapore where his love of cardiology began. While he was able to help others, his own body was emaciated from the effects of his imprisonment at the death camp in Burma. As a result, he developed cardiac beriberi, a protein deficiency which primarily affects the heart. However, his spirit was unbroken. In 1945, he was rescued by Dr. Tom Millikan and the USS Orange. When he was asked about the rescue, Millikan said, "His upper body was emaciated, skin and bones. The lower half of his body was bloated with the dropsy of beriberi, but the most striking thing about him was the blue eyes that blazed with defiance. Physically, he was a wreck, but his spirit was obviously unbroken." His mindset of fierce determination only furthered upon his return home to Ireland in 1945. Once home, Pantridge was awarded the Military Cross for his service. He threw himself into work, vowing to change the way the medical community looked at the heart. His first step was attending the University of Michigan, where he worked with Dr. Frank Norman Wilson. Dr. Wilson was a professor who specialized in cardiology. The two worked mostly on electrocardiography and other heart surgeries. Wilson had an exceedingly intricate and mathematical mind, but his passion was for teaching. With his help, Pantridge was able to gain a deep understanding for the electrical occurrences in the heart. In 1949, Pantridge finished at U of M, and he once again returned to Northern Ireland, where he introduced his new knowledge to the staff at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast. 6 years after his return, Boston native Dr. Paul Zoll released his own defibrillator. This invention weighed 200 pounds and distributed non-stop shocks of 480 volts of electricity to the intact chest. This was much more successful than the Hyman pacemaker, but was still highly flawed, and coronary mortality remained high. In the cardiology wing that Dr. Pantridge established at the Royal Victoria Hospital, he began to research, and he noticed a clear pattern. He realized that most patient deaths were caused by heart attack. In the 1960s, the most common cause of sudden death was ventricular fibrillation. 2/3 of these deaths occurred within 1 hour of attack and away from the hospital, so Pantridge quickly turned his attention to the defibrillator. Dr. Pantridge felt that the two most important features in his new defibrillator were safety and accessibility. To accomplish this, he decided that his defibrillator would release one shock of 230 volts on top of the intact chest. The shock time was 5 milliseconds and was set to avoid shocking when the heart was in its most vulnerable states in order to decrease mortality. In 1963, he first announced this to the cardiac unit at the Royal Victoria Hospital. Here, there were many unsuccessful trials and many non-believers, but this only pushed him harder and led him to the new idea of having a defibrillator as a mandatory piece of equipment in every ambulance. He went back to the idea that started the whole medical revolution, a car starter for your heart, but this time he took it a bit more literally than ever before. By 1965, with the help of John Geddes and Alfred Mawhinney, Dr. Pantridge announced his new and improved portable defibrillator to the world. It would be installed in Belfast ambulances operating off of car batteries. His literal interpretation of Dr. Hyman's idea broke the critical time barrier in emergency cardiac medicine. In the first 15 months of service, this system, known as the Pantridge Plan, saved 10 lives in Northern Ireland alone, earning it the nickname of the best place to have your heart attack. But even after his first great success, Dr. Pantridge kept reinventing. His first defibrillator weighed 70 kilograms and worked fine in vehicles but wasn't very practical for use outside of the ambulance. By 1968, he announced a new device with all the same technology but now only weighing 3 kilograms, which truly allowed the defibrillator to be put in the hands of the people. The Pantridge Plan was put into operation in the U.S. almost immediately. By 1969, almost all of American frontline ambulances were equipped with the new technology. But its popularity hit an all-time high in 1972 when it was used to save President Lyndon B. Johnson's life at his daughter Linda's home in Virginia. This gave Pantridge and his invention such notoriety in the U.S. that it was said by many that, despite his nationality, he could run for Congress and win. From here, the portable defibrillator's success only grew. In 1985, on the 20th anniversary of its invention, Dr. Richard Crampton, a cardiologist and colleague of Dr. Pantridge's, announced that in Central Virginia alone, the coronary mortality rate had dropped 25% since the adoption of the defibrillator. Today, the Irishman's invention has grown into the globally used AED. The automated external defibrillator is required in all U.S. federal buildings and all U.S. ambulances, and AED training is even taught in many schools across the world. In a study released by Johns Hopkins University, it said that in an average year, 522 lives are saved in the U.S. and Canada by the widespread placement of AEDs and Good Samaritans. The portable defibrillator has become a key piece in not only the medical field, but in all industries worldwide. Jeff Goss, a longtime firefighter and head of safety for Erickson Crane in Muskegon, Michigan, says,
Well, some of our sites are required to have AEDs on site. If we're doing any crane work around tower sites, communication sites, power generation sites, we're required to have CPR trained individuals and an AED on site know how to use it.
Dr. Frank Pantridge, known as the father of emergency medicine, broke barriers to effective cardiac care by inventing the portable defibrillator, thus taking emergency medicine from the hospital to the patients. This groundbreaking procedure opened the door for the modern AED, which helps to save countless lives every day. His invention was not only a great step for Irish medicine, but for the entire world.